Tumult and oppression. The phrase tumult or oppression in verse 2:193, also tyranny in other verses, which stands for fitna in Arabic, has traditionally been understood as idolatry, more accurately, the persistence of the Quraysh in the practice idolatry in rejection Islam. But modern scholars of Islam, concerned of non-Muslim and Western audience, have introduced these vague terms for fitna in English translations of the Quran. Influenced by these vague translations, many scholars of Islam are quick to assert that violent jihad or killing is allowed in Islam only under strict conditions, such as to fight tumult, oppression, or tyranny. It sounds very reasonable. Who doesn't appreciate the noble cause of fighting oppression or tyranny? But these terminologies require a thorough analysis in order to grasp what tumult, oppression, or tyranny truly stands for in the language of the Quran. In Arabic, fitna, also al-fasad, means dissension or discord among a group, violation of law and order, or disobedience, a revolution, or war against the establishment, or similar things. Given that, the Quraysh were in the helm of the administration of Mecca and Muhammad's community were the dissidents, it is only Muhammad, not the Quraysh, who could commit fitna in Mecca. How could then the Prophet and the Islamic God, for that matter, accuse the Quraysh of committing fitna? It is probably because, according to verse 2:193, also 839, the Quran was revealed by Allah, the Supreme Creator, as the supreme book of law and justice, which must prevail over all religions. Hence, a rejection or opposition to it, which exactly was the Quraysh's reaction to Muhammad's creed, could constitute fitna in the judgment of Muhammad and Allah. And this is exactly how Allah defines fitna in verse 2:217, graver is it in the sight of Allah to prevent access to the path of Allah, to deny Him, to prevent access to the sacred mosque, and drive out its members. Tumult and oppression are worse than slaughter. Thus, a simple rejection of the Islamic religion constituted tumult, oppression, and tyranny, which in turn was deemed worse than slaughter in the eyes of Allah and His Apostle. Readers must bear in mind that this offense of the idolatrous Quraysh was the sole reason for everything Muhammad inflicted upon them as described below. Furthermore, Muhammad's ideal protocol of dealing with the Quraysh and other idolaters of Arabia will, by extension, apply to any idolaters of the world at all time. Allah entreated Muslims again to extirpate all non-Muslim faiths, and fight them on until there is no more tumult or oppression, and there prevail justice and faith in Allah altogether and everywhere, but if they cease, verily Allah doth see all that they do. Quran 8:39. It seems that these verses were not enough to motivate at least some of Muhammad's disciples. They refused to engage in fighting the Quraysh or anyone else because of their dislikes for violence. Allah thereafter came with new verses making fighting a binding duty for all Muslims, they like it or not, fighting is prescribed for you, and ye dislike it. But it is possible that ye dislike a thing which is good for you, and that ye love a thing which is bad for you. But Allah knoweth, and ye know not. Quran 2:216. It also appears that the disciples of Muhammad had initially resisted against engaging in fighting, arguing that Allah had not sanctioned it. But when the desired sanction came down from the heaven, some of the non-violent, faint-hearted disciples were still undecided about engaging in violence, fearing bloodbath, and likely death. Allah admonished such timorous ones amongst Muhammad's followers, revealing, and those who believe say, why has not a chapter been revealed, on fighting? But when a decisive chapter is revealed and fighting is mentioned therein, you see those in whose hearts is a disease look to you with the look of one fainting because of death. Woe to them then! Quran 47:20. Most of Muhammad's early disciples were the rowdiest, belonging to the lower strata, of the society. Still, on account of their belonging to quite a non-violent and peaceful society, they expressed moral scruples when their jihad started claiming innocent lives. Allah removed this guilty feeling of Muhammad's followers by taking the responsibility of the cruel acts on Himself. So you did not slay them, but it was Allah who slew them, and you did not smite when you smote the enemy, but it was Allah who smote, and that He might confer upon the believers a good gift from Himself. Surely Allah is hearing, knowing. Quran 8:17. It further appears that some of Muhammad's Meccan disciples were particularly reluctant to engage in fighting or show hostility against the Quraysh, who were after all their own family members, relatives, and tribesmen. In order to convince them, Allah revealed verses encouraging them to sever their relationship with their kinfolk. For example, Allah revealed, "O you who believe! Surely from among your wives and your children there is an enemy to you, therefore beware of them." Quran 64:14. Allah encourages Muslims to invest all their power and resources in the cause of jihad, promising them of paying back in full. Make ready for them all thou canst of armed force and of horses tethered, that thereby ye may dismay the enemy of Allah and your enemy, and others beside them whom ye know not. Allah knoweth them. Whatsoever ye spend in the way of Allah it will be repaid to you in full and ye will not be wronged. Quran 8:60. It appears that some of Muhammad's followers were not willing to invest their wealth and resources in waging jihad for a simple return in full. Allah, therefore, promised to increase the return manifolds amongst other rewards, and what cause have ye why ye should not spend in the cause of Allah? Who is he that will loan to Allah a beautiful loan? For Allah will increase it manifold to his credit, and he will have, besides, a liberal reward. Quran 57:10-11. Still, there were some amongst Muhammad's followers, who were not willing to risk their resources by investing in Allah's jihadi wars, and Allah admonished them thus, "Behold, ye are those invited to spend in the way of Allah, but among you are some that are niggardly. But any who are niggardly are so at the expense of their own souls." Quran 47:38. These verses are the early exhortation and sanction of Allah for convincing Muslims to engage in violent attacks, i.e., jihad, or holy war, particularly against the Quraysh of Mecca. With this divine license for violence, Muhammad ordered the first jihad raid, Ghazwa, in February 623, only about 8 months after his arrival in Medina, against a trade caravan of the Quraysh passing through a nearby route for the twin purpose of plundering it and harassing the Quraysh. But it failed. Over the next few months, 2 more raids were ordered, which 2 were unsuccessful. About 12 months after his relocation to Medina, Muhammad himself started commanding the raids. Over the next few months, he personally commanded 3 raids, but all went in vain. XXXII. The raid of Nakhla. In January 624, the Prophet sent forth a band of 8 raiders under the command of Abdullah ibn Jahash for attacking a Meccan caravan at a place called Nakhla, which was 9 days' journey from Medina and only 2 days from Mecca. While sending them, the Prophet gave a letter in Abdullah's hand, instructing him to open it after 2 days' journey. Abdullah opened the letter at due time, which read, "When you have read this letter of mine, proceed until you reach Nakhla between Mecca and Al-Taif. Lie in wait there for the Quraysh caravan." XXXII. Abdullah and his party complied and reached Nakhla. It was the time of Orma, i.e., the lesser pilgrimage to the Kaaba. Not to alarm the approaching caravan, one of the Muslim raiders shaved his head to give an impression that they were returning from the pilgrimage, and therefore, could not be hostile. Once the caravan came within their reach, they fell upon it. 1 attendant of the caravan was killed, 2 were captured while another escaped. They returned to Medina with the rich caravan and the 2 prisoners. It was the sacred month of Rajab, one of the 4 months of the year, when fighting and bloodbath was prohibited in the Arabian tradition. This breach of the age-old sacred custom created great dissatisfaction and outcry among the citizens of Medina, including some disciples of Muhammad. This landed the Prophet in an awkward situation. He initially tried to distance himself from the incidents, putting the blame on the perpetrators' shoulders. But seeing that Abdullah and his CO raiders had become heartbroken, which could potentially discourage future raids, Allah quickly came to the rescue by revealing the following verse to justify the bloodshed, even though it took place during the sacred month. XXIX Mur, p. 225-228. XXIBN Ishaq, p. 287, Mur p. 208-209. They ask thee concerning fighting in the prohibited month. Say, Fighting therein is a grave offense, but graver is it in the sight of Allah to prevent access to the path of Allah, to deny him, to prevent access to the sacred mosque, and drive out its members. Tumult and oppression are worse than slaughter. Nor will they cease fighting you until they turn you back from your faith if they can. Quran 2:217. The verse concluded by warning those amongst Muslims, who had shown displeasure over the incident and could potentially leave Muhammad's creed, that, and if any of you turn back from their faith and die in unbelief, their works will bear no fruit in this life and in the hereafter, they will be companions of the fire and will abide therein. Quran 2:217. With this command, the fighting, and killing the Quraysh or any perceived enemy any time, anywhere, for any reason became divinely justified. The Prophet also honored Abdullah with the title of Amir al-Mu'minin, Commander of the Faithful. It needs to be taken into consideration that, prior to this successful plundering raid, Muhammad's community had been suffering from extreme hardships. Therefore, this blood-laden but successful raid had a special significance for Muhammad's community and creed in that it brought them rich booty, spoil of war, to assuage their hardships. Allah made plundering booty lawful to Muslims, revealing, "Now enjoy what ye have won, as lawful and good, and keep your duty to Allah." Quran 8:69. Allah also revealed a verse, Quran 8:41, on the distribution of booty captured in wars, and accordingly, the Prophet kept a fifth of the plunder as his share and the remainder was distributed amongst the raiders. The two prisoners were exchanged for ransoms bringing more revenues. XXXIV for Muhammad and his community. This also marked the beginning of embracing plundering and looting of non-Muslim caravans and communities as the major source of livelihood. The Great Battle of Badr. The next, indeed the most famous and significant, raid for Muhammad's prophetic mission came 2 months later in March 624. He planned to attack and plunder a rich caravan of the Quraysh, which was returning from Syria under the care of Abu Sufyan, the leader of Mecca. On the initiation of this raid, notes Ibn Ishaq, when the apostle heard about Abu Sufyan returning from Syria, he summoned the Muslims and said, "This is the Quraysh caravan containing their property. Go out to attack it, perhaps God will give it as a prey." The people answered his summons, some eagerly, others reluctantly because they had not thought that the apostle would go to war. XXXVI The intelligence of Muhammad's intended attack reached Abu Sufyan, who sent forth a messenger to Mecca for sending a rescue force. In the meantime, he took XXIXIBN Ishaq, p. 286-88. It becomes obvious that even at this time, more than a year after jihad or holy war was sanctioned by Allah, many followers of Muhammad were still reluctant to engage in violence. XXXIIBN Ishaq, p. 289. A diurent route along the Red Sea coast evading Muhammad's army and hastened the caravan to reach Mecca safely. But a rescue mission had already left Mecca to save the caravan as well as to teach Muhammad's plundering brigands a lesson. Muhammad had planned to ambush the caravan near a water-filled oasis, called Badr. Taking position there, he despoiled the water wells by filling them with sands, keeping only one usable next to his camp for the supply of water to his own army. He was unaware that Abu Sufyan had escaped with the caravan. As he heard of the approach of the Meccan army, he thought it was the caravan itself. When the Meccan army arrived at Badr on the 17th day of Ramadan after days of arduous journey through the hot sandy desert, they were tired and badly thirsty. But all the water wells had been despoiled by Muhammad, preventing them from quenching their thirst. On the Meccan side, there were about 700, some say 1,000, fighters, while Muhammad had only about 350 raiders. In the bloody confrontation that ensued the next morning, the thirsty Meccan army quickly succumbed and retreated with heavy losses despite their numerical advantage. They lost about 50 men and a similar number were taken prisoners, while Muhammad's party lost only 15 fighters. Some of the captives were cruelly slaughtered at the battlefield by Muhammad's order. XXXVII. Emboldened by the stunning victory at Badr, the Prophet soon attacked the Jewish tribe of Banu Qaynuqa of Medina and exiled them, described below. The disastrous Battle of Uhud. The unbelievable victory at Badr boosted the confidence of Muhammad and his community that God was on their side, helping them win against stronger oppositions in battles. Allah also sent down a tailor-made verse to arm that He was, indeed, assisting Muslims in battles by sending angels so that 20 steadfast Muslim leaders would be able to vanquish 200 opponents. Quran 8:66. Muhammad soon conducted 3 more raids on Meccan caravans plundering rich spoils. Exasperated and their life-sustaining commerce made impossible, the Quraysh finally decided to take offensive counteractions. On March 23, 625, some 3,000 Meccan leaders, under the command of Abu Sufyan, engaged about 700 Muslim leaders, commanded by Muhammad, at a place, called Uhud, near Medina. The numerically weak Muslim force quickly caved in and suffered heavy casualties, with Muhammad himself got struck by a stone, losing a tooth and falling unconscious. In this battle, Muslims lost 74 leaders against only 19 casualties on the Meccan side. As Muhammad had promised that 20 Muslim fighters, aided by angels, will vanquish 200 opponents before this disastrous battle, this severe loss of life created a great deal of suspicion, including amongst his disciples, about the veracity of his prophetic claim, and even a sense of hostility against him. His opponents, particularly the Jews and the hypocrite, Abdullah ibn Ubay, see below, for he was a hypocrite, also used the incidents to disparage Muhammad and spread doubts about his prophethood. Allah as usual came to Muhammad's rescue and countered. XXI Exhibit, P 289-314, Walker, P 11920.